What is up, you guys? I am Missy Renee, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the manifestation formula, or exactly what you need to do and what you need to know in order to start consciously creating a life that you love. So if manifestation and conscious creation are topics that you are interested in learning more about, then definitely do not forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon so that way you're notified when I release new videos every week. If you are interested in working with me or checking out any of my resources, I'll have those linked down in the description box below, so definitely be sure to check them out. So I've brought up this manifestation formula in previous videos, but today I really want to do a deep dive because this is everything. This is everything. And I notice that there's still people who have a lot of confusion, a lot of people who are still new to this, a lot of people who need some more clarity as to what exactly we do in order to create whatever we desire consciously. So today we're going back to the basics. We're going back to Manifestation 101. And this is especially for those of you who are new, or for those of you who may have been at this for a while and still find yourself struggling. Because there are two main ingredients when it comes to conscious creation. And one of those gets discussed often, but the other one doesn't get as much attention as it needs. And both of these are really important aspects. So if you are ready to go back to class, if you are ready to go back into the fundamentals and the foundation of how we create our reality, then definitely stick around to the end of the video, because I'm going to break down what these two things are and how you can better use them in your day-to-day so that you can start building the confidence and you can start finally seeing the results you desire to see. So jumping right into this, the two ingredients in the manifestation formula are imagination plus faith. It is through these two fundamentals that you can begin to start consciously creating the circumstances and creating the experiences that you desire to have. And Neville talks about these two in great length. So I'm going to do the same because there's still a lot of confusion around this. And it's totally understandable because when it comes to consciously manifesting, it is a radically different way of thinking. As a lot of you are probably already aware, we are always manifesting. This is something that we're always doing. We've always done it. We always will do it. It's not anything that we can shut off. This is something that we naturally perpetuate. We're always doing it. The issue for most of us is that most of our lives we've been manifesting unconsciously. We have not been aware of how we've been doing this and how we've been creating our circumstances. And it's not until we find out about the law that we finally have that insight and we finally understand that it is in fact our assumptions, our beliefs, and our concept of self that dictates what we experience. And the first ingredient, imagination, is what is talked about the most. Neville stresses the importance and really puts an emphasis on your imagination, and for good reason, because your imagination is your tool. That is the only free will that you actually have, is through your imagination. It's through the imagination that we can create different scenarios, that we can move into different states. It is the faculties that we use in order to create whatever it is that we experience in our day-to-day circumstances. So your imagination should definitely not be overlooked. And this is why there's such a strong emphasis on the imagination. Because if you want to change your outside circumstances, this is the first ingredient that needs to be invoked. As most of you know, if you want to change your circumstances, if you consciously want to move out of the state that you are dwelling in or the reality that you're experiencing, you must first go into imagination. Imagination is the doorway to consciousness, and consciousness is all that exists. And every scenario, every experience, every circumstance, any possible outcome that we can think of, that we can fathom, already exists in one of infinite states of consciousness. And imagination is the door that we can use to move into a new state of consciousness and how we can create a different scenario, different circumstance. So this is always step one. If you desire a change, the first thing that you must do is define that change, define whatever it is that you desire to experience, and then you go into imagination and you dwell there until it begins to feel real to you. And there's a number of ways that we do this. The most common that Neville talked about was through SATs, or imagining in the state akin to sleep. And I've already made videos talking in great detail about SATs, but if you are still new to Neville, or if you are still trying to work on using that imagination muscle in the state akin to sleep, I have a video that you can check out that goes into step-by-step directions on how to go into SATs. If you want to check out that video, I will leave the link up here. I'll also have it linked down in the description box below. But this is the first tool that we need to invoke when it comes to consciously creating a new experience. And this is emphasized often. A lot of teachers out there talk about imagination, and there's a really good understanding overall on how that process works. In this video though, I mainly want to talk about the second ingredient in this manifestation formula, because it's one that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's one where a lot of people stumble, and that is faith and keeping that faith. One of the most common questions that I get asked is about what we do after we have imagined. So after we have done SATs, or after we have imagined that end feeling, the desired feeling that we wish to experience, what do we do in that time between when we've imagined and when it ultimately comes to pass? And this is where people tend to stumble. This is for 99% of the time where people trip up, and what delays your manifestation or what ruins the manifestation entirely. A common theme that virtually everybody has experienced is after you have imagined your desired outcome, once you have filled your consciousness full of what you desire, then the questioning starts. Then the fear creeps in, then the doubts come in. Maybe the 3D circumstance is not at all what you want. Maybe it's taken some time. Maybe you're wondering if you're doing it right. Maybe you're questioning yourself if this is working for you. Maybe you think that you're broken and that it works for everybody else but you. These are things, and these are all telltale signs that you are not keeping the faith. And this is literally the only thing that you must do. Once you have imagined that desired outcome, once you have felt your desire in imagination, there's literally nothing left to do except to walk in the faith that what you have imagined must, in time, come to pass. And I know that there are some people out there that argue that you don't need to believe, or you don't need to have faith in order for it to manifest. And I'm going to come out here and say that this is not true. It says it everywhere in the Bible. You must have faith in the unseen reality. You must be able to walk by faith and not by sight, and not be dictated by what your physical senses are telling you is true. And it is this lack of faith that disrupts or delays your manifestation every single time. It is the lack of faith that causes people to doubt themselves, to question themselves, to start feeling anxious, to start looking for signs, to start reacting to the 3D circumstances. All of this comes down to lack of faith in the law. Now, you might say that, Missy, I 100% believe in the law. I know it's true. Deep down, it resonates with me. And I know that this is real. But when you are put to the test, your actions and your thoughts and your assumptions say otherwise. And this is why I always talk about the importance of being brutally honest with yourself, because it is typically in this time between when you have imagined your desired outcome and when it comes to pass that people struggle the most. And it is because 100% they lack the faith. And the law operates by faith. This is something that we cannot overlook. This is something that cannot be dismissed. If anybody says that you don't need faith, then you don't need to believe it, that is blatantly false, because it is through growing your faith and trusting in the law and trusting in yourself as the creator that you ultimately can detach yourself from your old way of thinking, your old state of consciousness, and your old way of reacting to things. Because we are creatures of habit, because we are so used to thinking and doing things and reacting to things a certain way, it is going to take an incredible amount of faith and trust in order to let go of the old man, to drop all of that old fear and that old doubt and that old insecurity. There is nothing left to do. Once you have imagined, once you have felt that desired outcome in imagination, there is literally nothing left to do except walk in the faith, in the assumption that it's done, that it must come to pass. I always liken it to placing an order online. When we go and place an order online, we don't spend the next few days freaking out about where it is or how it's going to show up or wondering what the hell's happening if we did it right or any of that. We know that once we place an order, it's going to show up in a few days. And that's that. It's literally the same thing applied here. If we desire to see the change that we want to see, then we must repent. And repent means radical change of thinking. We must radically change the way that we have always thought about things, the way that we've always looked at things, the way that we've always assumed things work. We must radically change. This is all very new ways and very different ways of looking at things. And this is why so many people struggle when it comes to implementing the law. We are not used to this way of thinking. So repentance is what we must do, and that's what the Bible talks about. But it means radically change the way in which we think and the way that we approach everything. And one of the questions that I get asked the most often when I talk about faith is, how do we grow the faith? How can we keep the faith? How can we ultimately learn to detach from our 3D circumstances? How can we trust in that unshakable knowing that our imagination creates reality? Because again, we have always looked to the outside and looked to the 3D surroundings as fact. And we've always looked at our imagination as make-believe. So again, this comes down to a radical change in the way that we think about things and the way that we view things and the way that we assume this works. But how do we keep the faith? How do we keep ourselves from reacting to the outside circumstances? How do we stop doubting ourselves and questioning ourselves? And how do we stop the fear and anxiety from getting the best of us? And I made a video going into detail about different ways that you can start to build your faith. If you want to check out that video, I will leave that link up here, and I'll also have it down in the description box below. But there are 2 ways in which you can start building the faith and trust in the law that is going to get you from where you are now to ultimately where you desire to be. Number one, and this is the most important, and I've talked about it before, and I'm going to repeat myself, you need to test it. You need to test the law. You need to test it often. Neville always said that faith is not complete until, through experiment, it becomes experience. And I want you to take a moment to think about right now the beliefs that you currently have. Why do you have the set of beliefs that you have? It's because those have been your experiences. Whatever you have personally experienced, you are going to believe and assume and trust that it's true. If things have always worked out a certain way for you, then that is naturally going to be the direction in which your faith goes. So it is through experience that we can ultimately learn a new way of doing things. But testing the law and testing it often is an absolute must. We're not going to be able to maintain the faith that we need by just taking Neville's word for it or taking my word for it. It's something that you need to experience for yourself before you can really start to form that foundation, that unshakable foundation that ultimately gets you from where you are to where you need to be. And there are many different ways that you can test the law. The most common ways that people do this, and the one that I recommend, is to create a list or even just think of things that you desire to see come to pass. Make it small. Make it things that you're not attached to. Little things, insignificant things that you can ultimately conjure up and then drop it. Seeing a hot pink car, seeing a blue butterfly, somebody giving you a compliment, an old friend reaches out to you that you haven't talked to in a long time. It could be anything, but you must start putting the law to the test if you haven't already. Now, I know for some people, they've said to me, Missy, I've tested the law. I've tried to test the law. I've made a list of everything, and none of it came to pass. So now what? If this is your experience, if this is what's happened to you, it's because you didn't drop it. It's because you went looking for it. It's because you were constantly trying to make it happen. You were trying to scan your environment to make it come to pass. And we cannot approach manifestation in this way, because if you are looking for it, you clearly are not trusting in the process. You are not keeping the faith. And anyone who has manifested anything knows that the manifestation comes to pass when we are able to trust and let go. It's when you're not thinking about it that it shows up. So we need to be mindful of how we are approaching testing the law. We really need to pay attention to the state that we're in and where we're coming from, because you cannot manifest from a state of desperation. You cannot manifest from a state of lack. You cannot manifest from a state of fear. I mean, you can manifest from those states, but it's not going to be what you want. The way that I did it, and the way that I always tell people to do it, is to either make a list, or even better yet, just throughout your day, start imagining what you want to see. Whatever pops into your head as you're going about your day, whatever pops into your head, go with it. And then think of something else. And then think of something else. And then think of something else. The only issue that I have with making a list is that, again, people get obsessive about that list. They are constantly scanning and looking for those things on that list. But if you are just popping things up in your mind throughout your day, just going along natural, not focusing too hard, not really thinking about it, that's when you'll start to see more things come to pass. But most importantly, it is how you approach testing. It is what state you are in when you are testing this. The way you want to do this and the way that you want to approach this, and this goes for the big things, it goes for the little things, and it goes for everything in between. You want to have fun with this. You want to turn it into a game. You want to play. It should be fun. It should not be stressful or tense or desperate, anything like that. We need to just have a playful energy about the law, and this is how we need to approach it. Turn it into a game. Just have fun with it, because this life, this whole experience, is all just a game anyways. It's all a play, and we are the actors, we are the directors, we are the screenwriters. Find a way to turn this into a fun game that you're playing throughout your day to day, and then just drop it. Literally, just drop it. Because it's as soon as you drop those images, it's as soon as you drop those desires that inevitably you will see some come to pass. And the more and more that you test this, and the more and more that you experience this for yourself firsthand, that is how you build the faith. Then the second way that will help you build your faith is to stop and look back. Look back over all the areas of your life and look for the correlations between what happened, the event, and what your state of mind was in that time. You will see that direct connection between the state of mind that you were carrying and what ultimately played out. You will see this everywhere. It is impossible to miss it because that is literally how the law works. So if you are faced with something in your 3D that you don't want or that you don't like, stop and ask yourself, where is this stemming from? What was I dwelling on before this happened? Was I anxious? Was I doubtful? Was I fearful? And if you go back and look, you can always find the correlation. You can find the direct connection between the event that unfolded and what you were dwelling on, or the state of consciousness that you were dwelling in. And I want to give you guys a story that Neville told to give you some more inspiration and a better idea of how you need to go about applying this law and applying this manifestation formula. Back in 1943, when I came out of the Army, I was looking for an apartment. My wife and I had determined how much we were going to pay for it. But when we found the apartment, the rent was more than we had planned to pay. Realizing this, my wife said, "Well, that's not demonstrating this principle, is it?" I said nothing. I simply paid the months of September and October, but when I went to pay the November rent, the manager said, "I have an apology to make to you." An authority of the city came in and looked over my books. He discovered that the apartment you have was formerly rented for less. Then he quoted the new rent figure to me, which was to the dollar the amount I had originally chosen to pay. It took me 3 months of being faithful to what I had imagined I was paying, even though during that time I was paying more. But since the reduced rent was retroactive to the day I moved in, I got it all back at the beginning of the 3rd month. I committed myself in my imagination to what I was going to pay. I went looking, and because I was going to pay more, in his eyes, he gave me all kinds of concessions he would not have done had I paid him what the former tenant did. First of all, he allowed us to pick out the wallpaper, the colors, and rooms we wanted painted. He even built a bookshelf for me, which covered an entire wall for all my books. He did everything I wanted. But if I had gone in there and gotten the rent for the amount I said I would pay, he would not have built the bookcase for me, given me the wallpaper, or painted the entire apartment to my specifications. Only then was the rent reduced to the amount I had imagined it to be, and we remained there almost 14 years. I tell you, imagination will not fail you if you are faithful. What could I say when I was confronted with the negation of my assumption? Nothing. I simply would not give up. And when the time was right, my assumption became a fact. I urge you to set your goal high. Assume the feeling has been reached and sleep in that feeling. Persist, and I promise you that not one thing in this world can rob you of what you have assumed. And I absolutely love this story, and it's wonderful for a number of reasons. The first reason is that Neville did not give up. He was relentless, even though he was paying more than he had intended to pay. For those first few months, the outside world, the outside circumstances were clearly the opposite of what he had intended. Nevertheless, he persisted. He faithfully and stubbornly kept persisting in the knowing that what he imagined, that rent amount that he imagined, would ultimately come to pass, even though it looked very unlikely given the circumstance. But even better is that he got the concessions that he wanted. And he would not have gotten those concessions. He wouldn't have got the bookshelf. He wouldn't have been able to paint his rooms, the wallpaper, all of those things. If the rent had been that amount from day one, he wouldn't have received those extra concessions that he desired. So not only did he ultimately get what he wanted, but he got what he wanted and then some. Your imagination will not fail you if you are faithful. It doesn't matter what the 3D looks like. It doesn't matter what the outside circumstances are telling you. Neville didn't throw his hands up in the air after a week or a month or even 2 months and give up. He relentlessly and continuously persisted because he knew, he had that faith that what he imagines and that what he assumes is ultimately what he must experience. And I really wanted to share this with you all because it says point blank what to do in those moments when the 3D does not look the way that you want it to look. When there is something that comes up that is unwanted, undesired, and it looks like you have no idea how your manifestation could possibly come to pass, it doesn't matter because it will. It must. Your imagination will not fail you if you are faithful. So going forward, I want you all to remember the manifestation formula. I want you all to remember that it is your imagination plus faith that will ultimately create any circumstance, any experience, all the events, anything. It all boils down to your imagination, your creative tool, and the faith in what your senses and reason might presently deny. Once you do this, once you have learned to recondition and repent and radically change the way that you think so that you can keep the faith in your assumption, once you are able to successfully use your imagination, feel yourself where you desire to be, and keep the faith that you must experience it, that is how you manifest anything that you want. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, do not forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in checking out any of my other resources, I will have my links below to my coaching website, my blog, my social channels, my new podcast, all that good stuff. You can find it down in the description box, so definitely give it a look. Also, do not forget to check out these videos over here. Each video is a different topic, but all go into how to manifest the best life possible. So until we meet again, you guys, take care, be well, and never forget the manifestation formula of imagination plus faith. You can go anywhere that you want to go. Happy manifesting, y'all.